At the beginning of the year, we made the prediction that projectors would be pushed aside in favor of big screen TVs.
The power to tell a story is in us all. The power to change the way we feel, our understanding, change the rules, how we see ourselves, provoke, change history. Together, let's change the bigger picture, change access, put camera gear in more hands, and keep the story going. Buy, sell, and trade used camera gear. MPB.
Some pretty big manufacturers, in fact, number 2 manufacturer in the world in terms of TVs, and number 3 in the world in terms of TVs, all releasing 98-inch and above LCD TVs to the mass market consumer. One 98-inch TV came in at under £2,000. It's not to say it was a great TV with lots of features, but it kind of showed you where we are in terms of the scale, in terms of manufacturing, and that they could get the price down in terms of that kind of real estate when it came to screens. So that then puts the question or the emphasis onto the projector, short throw projectors, long throw projectors, high-end projectors. Have they had their day? We made the prediction back then that we thought that high-end and home cinema would stay around. And why wouldn't it? It's a different proposition, I think, Neil, in terms of the projected image, the reflected image, and when it's done right, no other display technology comes close to that.
Well, no, simple as that. You got the power, then off you go.
Yeah. The flip of the coin is obviously large screen TV, direct view, more light output, capable to do HDR properly because you've got the dynamic range. And when the technology gets there, you're going to have the black levels, you're going to have the contrast and stuff to go with that. So where are we at the end of the year? We're seeing cheaper and cheaper TVs. Neil, I saw one model that you had on your stand at EI Live. It wasn't a consumer model, but again, it was 21:9. It was aimed at a certain segment of the market, but one that we think is going to grow over the next few years. So we're going to see more changes here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that once you get to a certain size, which is about 100 inches, right? There's not many living rooms that can take a TV over that size. So I think as a general consumer product, they'll have to start looking at what else differentiates. I could be wrong, of course. TCL have got bigger than that and everything, but I think that that's a point where you start to see that really then quality needs to come into the whole mix. Now, we showed that display, which is a 21:9 display, and of course that's different. That's a commercial rated panel for 24/7 applications and a million and one other different things that add up to the cost of a display like that. But everyone was struck by the 21:9 aspect. It just looked cool. It looked more cinematic than I think people were used to seeing. It was like a projected image because of course people are used to that shape, but with TV properties. And I think it was almost like a trick that we pulled, sorry everyone, to show a display like that. And I hope that we will see a lot more innovation like that in flat panels. Now, I don't know if you're going to touch on projectors, but I think that's also a very, very interesting area.
Well, absolutely, because this was our prediction. Our prediction was that big screen TVs were going to become very prevalent, and they have, but not to the extent that it would kill off the projector. Because I think once you get to a certain level with projection, it's a bit like vinyl versus digital streaming. You're always going to have those that go for a certain performance level, and for me, projection, even though it can't do HDR particularly well, and it needs help in that area, but actually, a lot of the content that Hollywood produces never really gets over 600 nits. So do you actually need, big 4,000 net displays to be able to show something that was never mastered to that level anyway? And for me,
but I think also, Phil, I think maybe these flat panel displays need to somehow capture that quality a little more, that slightly softer filmic quality, that a projector does, and then I think people might be persuaded to go more in that direction. I mean, I think 21 by 9 monitors are really exciting, but if they can get that sort of somehow filmic quality as well, you might draw more of
Yeah.
the sort of
Yeah.
legacy or conventional people towards that.
I think you'll see a drift towards it, but for me, and the question that we posed at the beginning of the year was, would it kill off projection? Absolutely not. You know, you're not, and the stuff that Neil does, 200-inch, 250-inch screen, or you're putting in an IMAX system or something along those lines, you're always going to need the projector to do that, until micro LED gets to the point where you can put a screen wall in at those sizes. And we're still talking 10 years away, I think, with that technology, just in terms of yield sizes and getting the panels to look the same when you put them together and so on. We're still miles away there. So for me, the projector, and I think this was the conclusion we had at the beginning of the year, was going to stay around. But
The
there is
truly
this,
dark room as well. The
yeah.
dark room is that magical thing that draws your attention to the screen, and it is by default more immersive.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to jump in there. So there's one thing I did not expect to see ever, and that is the lifestyle projector, guys. The lifestyle projector. Who would have thought that that would be
Mhm.
such a thing?
Yeah.
Epson have got a new one, looks really cool.
Yeah.
What's that one that you cannot go on social media without getting 53 adverts?
LG's thing. Is it
Oh, there's LG, there's another one.
yeah.
I can't remember. But these things are suddenly everywhere, right?
Hmm.
Um, they're not very high resolution or mega bright, but you know what? It sits on a little stand. You point it at some bit of the wall, and bosh, there it is.
Yeah.
And you stream from your phone onto that. I did not see that coming. But what a cool thing for so many people in this day and age, and kids with phones and all that type of stuff. I actually think that that's a very, very interesting category. We've spoken on these things many times about gateway drugs and all that type of stuff
Yeah.
for younger generation coming into this. I can totally see that that is actually something that brings them in. You go on Amazon, you can buy one of these things for 100 quid and you can stream your
Yeah.
phone to it and all the rest of it. That was fine but rubbish, but now they're actually pretty decent, and a few £100 gets you into it.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
maintaining the level, that the interactivity and the sense of event and sense of occasion. It's something that turntables have been mining very enthusiastically for 15 years.
It's nice of you to join us, Ed. I thought we'd put you in a coma because we started talking about TV there and moved
Well, I
straight
mean,
away
I
from
did briefly
hi-fi.
glaze over, but my cat just moved and I thought I'd still wake up. So
Yeah, nice to have you back in the room. No, I totally agree with you, Neil. That's I don't think anybody kind of I saw these products at CES and I had a few product briefings on them and so on. I just thought, well, is there really a market for? I mean, even Larva are doing one, a
Yeah,
high end
yeah, I
one, but
saw that, absolutely.
and you think, well, but yeah, they're proven to be very, very popular. But again, back to what Martin said about the dark room and so on. I think this is where we start to see the crossover, Martin, because I think you'll always have the sector of the market that Neil works in, where it's a dedicated room, a theatre room, where you have a proper installed system, a projection system, kaleidoscope servers, or DCI cinema in Neil's case, that kind of thing. You're always going to have that. That's always going to be there. That's going nowhere. I think the crossover is where, and I think where these big panels come in is where we get into the room design, room decor, and so on, because you don't need the black space. You don't need the contrast effect round about the screen to get the quality from it. And I think that's where it'll become more popular. And I think in terms of the mass market, I think mass market will go more towards a larger screen than the projectors. And I think I could be wrong, but I think it was a prediction that we made at the beginning of the year, and I think it's starting to come true, is that UST's ultra short throw projection, where you need to have an ambient light projection screen on the wall and the projector and so on. I think that's the market that's going to get cannibalized with these big displays, and that's where you'll see those projectors, I think, will disappear quite quickly. And apart from the higher end ones, I think we'll see that area of the market changing. Ed, what's your opinion on this? You've heard us all babbling on about our stuff and so on, but you're somebody that is not invested in TV or
no,
projectors and so
I
on. So
I do
what's your
agree.
view?
I do agree exactly with your last point there. Those ultra short throw projectors are the exact chronological equivalent of those giant DLP TVs that appeared to bridge the gap before plasma and LCDs reached a certain size, because they were cheap and they were huge and you could get a 720p image out of them. Large flat screen TVs will almost certainly demolish ultra short throw. From the perspective of event, just I touched on it briefly, and it's been all through this. I don't think the projector market is ever going to go away because of this event, because of this. A couple of you together. I mean, we've touched over the years I've been doing this that the cinema is not my happy place. It's full of people, and people are awful. But essentially, being able to replicate that without the unwanted extra people in there, being able to do it at a proper level, that's never going to, for the people with the resources and the determination to do so, it's not going to go away. And until such time as you go into a multiplex cinema and it's not a projected image, that's the way it's going to be, isn't it? It's the same with, increasingly fringe bits of 2-channel. They disappear from more conventional price points, but they don't disappear altogether, because when you are building something honed and adapted for the task, you want it to be done not only in a way that is technically brilliant, but just in a way that it has been done for donkey's years, because you don't want to be the person that changes it. So all of that seems to bear fruit. The other thing is, we talk about these increasing TV sizes. In this country, I don't doubt that it's going to be possible to sell more 75-100-inch televisions than was historically the case, because there's going to be more availability and they're going to be a lower price. They're still going to be headbutting the realistic constraints of just how much wall people have. I think people hoping that this is going to be the next gold mine,
you'll be
surprised. Going to be bitterly disappointed by just the shape and general shoddiness of UK houses.
That's why I don't see over 100 inches. There's no, you can't fit it. You filled your wall at that point.
Physically, it's just not going to work.
And the other thing is the weight of these things. So I was in Poland with TCL looking at their 115-inch. It's a 3-man lift, just to lift that TV. And then you got other issues, which I'm not going to name the manufacturer, but the production line issues. How do you lift a screen of that size and then put it into a box and then make sure it's packaged properly? And then when it gets to destination, it works when it gets to the destination. One manufacturer who, I'm not going to name, but their machine that was lifting it off the production line, putting it in the box, is breaking every one, just because of the weight that was involved. And it was a pinch point that wasn't being picked up until the TV was getting to the destination. And so, again, you're adding in this complex. So I agree with you. I think 100, 115 is probably the maximum for the UK anyway. I think our friends over the pond have more real estate in general to play with. What's surprised me is, and I'm going to admit to this, is when I take the dog out at night and I go walking around the estate that I live on, and you happen to glance in the living room windows, the number of screens that are over 65 inches on people's walls.
Yep.
That's really surprised me in terms of the growth in that area. And you see it in the figures. We had Paul Gray on podcast during the year, and he was saying, that is the area why you still got a TV market, because that is where product is being sold and is not just a replacement commodity. It's actually something that people want and are investing money in. So yeah, I think the TV's here to stay. I think the projector's here to stay. I think other sectors of the market like USTs and so on, I think you're just going to see evolutionary changes as that product fill the gap and other products come along and taking its place and moving on.
If you wanted a prediction for next time round, because of this, is something that cropped up in conversation with a normal person I was having the other day. I have two 55-inch televisions, and it's still quite a preeminent size. I don't think that's going to be sustained for very much longer. I think exactly what you say. If you want the big lounge television, it's going to be 65 or better. And then there's going to be a clutch of smaller televisions running up to and about 40 45, 47 inches. And this weird hinterland of neither small enough to tuck away in a corner, but too small to have a center of place in your room. And the 55 is that perfect, not quite right for either. I think we're actually going to see a decline in 55s over time. If you wanted an out there prediction from someone who has no understanding of the TV market whatsoever, but something I feel in my bones is that one, because it's the price difference, let's face it, between 55 and 65 is not anything to get excited about. And now that the yields are up on smaller OLEDs, to say nothing of LED televisions, which can be banged out in any size that you choose, smaller televisions are going to be working in the smaller spaces as well.
I think you're already seeing that in certain sectors. LCD 50-inch and below it is a certain price point, and it won't go over that price point because that panel is produced in one factory or two factories, and those TVs are of a certain quality. And then above that, there is differences. You've seen that in LCD. OLED 42, 48 have been surprisingly popular in terms of screen size. So yeah, but at the minute, 55 exists in the quantity that it does and at the price points it does just through the cutting of the glass.
Yeah.
So the mother glass in terms of the production facilities, we're at 8.5. In terms of generations, that's the way it's cut. So you get more 55s than 65s. And then I think if you cut a 77, you get 250 or no 248s out of that. So yeah, at the minute that's why it's the way it is. But no, I think you're right. I think more and more people are moving to larger and larger screens, and you can see it just through the neighbours' windows at the minute, and you see the size of screens on the walls.
So not recommending peeping through people's windows.
No.
But that's I think that's also the point I was making about that passive usage of that technology in your space, because it's so huge you can't ignore that big telly on the wall. Now we've got products like the frame and gallery TV, etc., etc. But that's also, in fact, size limited for me. You're not going to look at a picture at 115 inches, and because it's not realistic. Also, it's how is that going to be used to create a passive ambience in a space? I think that's one of the big things that you're going to start a lot of people looking at.
It's going to be like standing in front of a Stargate.
Oh, yeah, but honestly, it is. What's the one that they did in New York and Ireland? Maybe it's a bit.
Oh yeah, the portal thing. Yeah,
a bit more PG than that. But hey, who knows? Maybe people pay money for that.
There's probably some unaccountable rule of thumb known somewhere in TV engineering circumstances that the point at where pornography becomes uncomfortable to watch is some sort of benchmark to television size that hasn't been made publicly known, but is probably well known in engineering and marketing circles.
Yeah. And I think the game changer, I know, Neil, you have some connections to this. So micro LED, if it works, and it works up to a certain point at the minute, the question we have is can it actually move over to mass production? And that's where there seems to be a bit of a sticking point at the minute in terms of yields. So, but if we do get there, that is the game changer, because then your whole entire wall can become a screen because you just put the number of panels that you want together to create any aspect ratio, any size of screen that you want.
Well, it does, but I still don't think people realize how impossibly complex that problem is. Because so I do a lot of lighting stuff as well, Phil, and I had a very nice lunch today where I was discussing lighting and thermal properties and all that type of stuff. If you want an LED that's a millimeter across or less, a third of a millimeter for one of these colors, and you want that to produce 4,000 nits, think of the power that you've got to put into that thing. And that heat has to go somewhere, and a million and one other really complicated things. How do you get the circuits and all that type of stuff that are required? It's a very, 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 very difficult challenge from an engineering perspective to overcome these things. And I know that everyone is trying to solve that problem, but if you say to someone that RGB micro LED wall is the equivalent of 8 million of the lights that are in your ceiling on a complexity level, 8 million lights, that's like, quite a few cities added together worth of lighting. That's the level of complexity that you're trying to gram into these little spaces.
Yeah.
And Look, one of these days, I'm sure it'll happen, but it ain't going to be tomorrow, that's for sure.
No, no. And I think it's been one of these carrots that's been dangled in front of everybody for such a long time now, and it's everybody's starting to get impatient now. It's like, yeah,
Well,
okay, so
look, we've all just had that discussion. Once you get to 100-inch, what's
yeah.
actually the advantage? Really?
Mm.
What's the advantage?
But
You
also, it
get
so
that.
much depends on your viewing angle as well. And with 4K, you really can get quite close to a set, even though they do get quite warm. But yeah, you really can get very, and in fact, in my small proportion living room, I'm very close to a 65-inch TV, as it turns out. So
Yeah, yeah. And I stood in front of one of those Samsung walls as well at CES, the giant wall, and the amount of heat that was
yeah,
coming off that screen. And I don't know if you've seen the one in Harrods, or if it's been replaced since I last saw it. But again, because of the heat, you were starting to see, because it's playing the same clips over and over again, you were starting to see retention issues and that kind of thing, just with the heat that was being generated. And
You
as
design
well,
and lighting these days, the thermal issues are far, far, far more difficult to manage than anything else.
yeah.
You can jam more power into it to make it brighter and do a million and one different things, but that heat has to go somewhere. And LEDs are relatively inefficient, more efficient than an incandescent bulb, of course they are. But if you compare that to what you're being able to get on an OLED or anything like that, yeah, that heat is going to be a very difficult challenge to overcome. No one wants to get a telly that's got 10 fans in the back of it, for example.
Right, guys. Well, thank you very much for your predictions.